Welcome, dreamers, to another journey through time's hidden corridors. I am your guide through the dreaming historian, where ancient mysteries whisper their secrets to those who dare to listen. Tonight, we venture into the enigmatic realm of Easter Island, a place where time itself seems to stand still. This is not merely the story of stone statues, but of a civilization wrapped in shadow and silence, suspended in the echo of waves and forgotten rituals. Before we embark on this mystical journey, if these whispers from the past resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle like and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing for more nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you are joining tonight's contemplation. Let our global community of mystery seekers connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Now, settle into comfort, close your eyes, and let the ancient voices guide you into peaceful contemplation. Far across the trembling waters of the South Pacific, beyond the trade winds and drifting currents, lies an island adrift in solitude, a speck of land so remote, it appears almost imaginary upon ancient maps. This is Rapa Nui, known to the wider world as Easter Island, but to those who walk in dreams and listen for echoes between the stones, it is something more. It is an island where time does not flow like a river, it pools, still and deep, waiting to be touched. Beneath skies often veiled in silver mist, the land rises softly, volcanic hills folding into valleys, and windswept plains dotted with the quiet guardians of stone. Here, the Moai stand, colossal faces carved from time itself, gazing inland with expressions unreadable, as if listening for something long vanished. They are more than statues, they are questions without answers. Legends speak of the island being birthed from the navel of the world. Te Pito o Te Henutha, umbilical cord of the earth. The ancients believed it to be a place where the spirit of the land was most powerful, a point where earthly time collided with sacred stillness. And so, even now, the soil seems to breathe with stories too old to name. The first arrivals to this place are cloaked in mystery. Some say they came from the Marquesas, others whisper of a lost homeland to the west called Hiva. They came across vast oceanic deserts, using nothing but stars and instinct, in canoes carved from trees, long extinct. When they found this island lonely, distant, untouched, they believed they had stepped into another world, a place preserved by silence. And so, they named it, claimed it, and began the long ritual of becoming one with it. In those earliest days, time was measured not in hours or days, but in shadows. The sun rising over the Rongorongo quarry, the moon bathing the plains of Ahutungariki, the people moved in harmony with the land's slow breath, carving their legends into the basalt, coaxing spirit from stone. They did not rush. Time, on this island, did not demand urgency. It unfolded like a chant. Yet as the centuries passed, the world beyond moved faster. Civilizations rose and fell in noise and fire. But Rapa Nui remained anchored in its sacred slowness. Ships sailed past on distant horizons, but the Moai did not turn their gaze. The people did not follow. There is a power in it becomes a womb of memory, a keeper of ancient rhythms. It was said by the elders that every Moai held them another spiritual force of an ancestor. These towering figures were not symbols. They were vessels. Their eyes, when inlaid with coral and obsidian, saw beyond this realm, watching both past and future. Time for them was not linear. It circled, spiraled, whispered. As night falls across the island today, the winds still carry those whispers. The Moai are not alone. Beneath them, the earth itself is a vast library. Caves like veins run through volcanic stone, filled with petroglyphs of birds and stars. Above, the skies turn slowly, revealing constellations unchanged for millennia. And around it all, the sea, the endless, dreaming sea laps against the edges of this forgotten world, guarding its secret like a mother cradles a child. Modern minds often ask, how did such an isolated people create such monuments? How did they transport these giants across hills and slopes? And why did they stop? But to ask these questions is to speak in the language of speed and logic. To understand Rapa Nui is to slow one's breath, to listen with the bones. It is to stand still, utterly still, and feel time not as a forward march, but as a sacred stillness, a breath held forever. There are many names for such places. Some call them liminal, others portals, but here on this wind-blown island of green and stone, we might call it something simpler, a memory made solid. As you close your eyes and drift with the wind, imagine walking barefoot along the worn paths of the ancestors. The air is thick with salt and silence. The stone faces rise around you like dream fragments. You do not know their names, but they know yours. You do not speak, and yet you are heard. Let us now pass through the ancient forest that once blanketed this land, where trees rose like spires, and birds unknown to science once sang in echoing canopies. A place where the rhythm of life was slow, sacred, and unseen. In the next chapter, we shall walk beneath the vanished trees, into the breath of an island that once knew abundant sand, learn how the world was held in balance. Before the Moai rose, before the land was carved by reverent hands, Rapa Nui was a cradle of trees, a green haven in the vastness of blue, veiled in palms that whispered in the wind and stretched toward the stars. It is difficult now, standing upon its grass-covered hills, to imagine the ancient forest that once stood here. But close your eyes, dreamer, and let us walk together beneath its vanished canopy. These were not mere trees. The forests of Easter Island were said to be sacred, filled with towering Pachylococcus palms that reached over 20 meters high. Their trunks were smooth, their fronds broad, their roots digging deep into volcanic soil. They grew not in chaos, but in harmony and emerald choir, singing the slow song of island life. Birds, now gone, once danced from branch to branch. Frigate birds, herons, perhaps even parrots of unknown color and voice. The sky above the canopy was not yet divided by human line, only constellations known to navigators and shamans. The people below walked softly on shaded paths, gathering fruit, tending small gardens, and building canoes from trees that had known centuries. This was the time before time, when no clocks divided the day, and no metal pierced the earth. The people lived in cyclical rhythm, honoring the land not as property, but as breath and body. Rituals were held beneath the trees, chants echoing upward into the branches, like prayers cast into wind. The forest gave shelter, food, and faith. It also gave the canoes that brought the first Moai. You see, the earliest statues were not meant to be immobile. They were moved not by machines or wheels, but by human devotion and ingenious knowledge of balance and timber. Great tree trunks were placed beneath the heavy bodies, ropes of twisted bark and fiber guiding them like gentle beasts. It was not a feat of force, but of song and unity. Each statue's journey from quarry to platform was a sacred procession. The land allowed it because the land was still whole. But with each statue raised, a tree fell. With each platform built, a piece of forest was sacrificed. At first the balance held, the people replanted, renewed, the forest breathed its wisdom slowly. Yet as generations passed, the ceremonies grew grander. The Moai grew taller, heavier, more numerous. Chiefs competed not just in power, but in legacy. Who could build the highest, who could summon the greatest mana. And the forest, generous at first, began to fade. Imagine the silence that must have come when the last great palm fell. The birds would have flown in widening circles, confused by the opening sky. The soil, once shaded and moist, began to crack beneath a harsher sun. Canoes could no longer be carved. Food became scarcer. Winds blew harder across naked plains. This was not merely deforestation, it was the beginning of forgetting. The ancestors had once whispered wisdom through bark and breeze. Now their voices echoed off stone and rock. The people turned more fiercely to the Moai, asking for guidance, protection, but the statues did not speak. They watched, and watched, and watched. Some say the people began to dig, to search for water and memory in the dry earth. Others tell of a long migration around the island, searching for what was lost. And in this shift from forest to field, from trees to stone, a new myth was born. The myth of the stopping of time. No longer did the days pass in shadow and leaf. Now they passed in sun and drought. No longer did birds call at dawn. Now the wind carried only silence. This moment in history is not marked by war or invasion, but by stillness. A stillness that settled into the bones of the island like ash. From afar, to European eyes, centuries later, Easter Island appeared timeless, a world frozen in prehistory. But to the descendants of those who felled the final trees, it was something more poignant, a memory that could not be undone. As we leave this vanished forest behind, let the rustle of phantom leaves follow you like a hush through your dreams. The ground beneath your feet remembers. Every blade of grass here grew from the fallen breath of trees long gone. In the next chapter, we step into the sacred quarry where the Moai themselves were born. Let us walk into the volcanic cradle of Rongorongo, where stone once dreamed of faces. At the heart of Rapa Nui lies a sleeping mountain, an extinct volcano, whose flanks cradle one of the island's most sacred and sorrowful places. Its name is Rongorongo, and though it no longer breathes fire, it once birthed giants. For it was here that the Moai were born, not from womb or myth, but from stone. Imagine it, dreamer. A warm wind tracing the crater's rim, stirring grasses that whisper like ancient breath. A hush rests on the mountain's side, broken only by the call of a distant seabird or the rustle of reeds near the crater lake. And then there they are, dozens of moai, some upright, others lying in repose, half buried in the earth like dreams never finished, heads rising from soil as though in slow emergence from the past. This is no ordinary place. The quarry at Rongorongo is more than a mine. It is a sacred nursery of ancestors. Here skilled hands and hearts carved each figure from the soft volcanic tuft, generation after generation. The carvers worked with obsidian tools, shaping the elongated noses, deep-set eyes, and solemn mouths. These were not mere sculptures, they were invocations. Each moai represented a revered ancestor, infused with spirit, meant to stand watch over the living and bridge the realms of the seen and unseen. But what remains astonishing, even in the quiet light of contemplation, is how many of these moai were left unfinished. Over 400 statues still reside within the slopes of Rongorongo, some nearly complete, others barely begun. Some are upright, standing like sentinels against time. Others lie horizontal, their backs still fused to the mountain as though awaiting a final breath that never came. What halted their rising? Perhaps it was the forest's fall, which ended the ability to transport them on. Or perhaps the people began to question the wisdom of raising more ancestors. When the earth itself had grown weary. There are whispers of civil unrest, of rival clans whose devotion became division. But here, in this quiet quarry, one senses not violence but mourning. The mountain itself seems to grieve. Walk with me, slowly, among the sleeping faces. Notice how they are not identical. Some smile faintly, others seem stern or sorrowful. A few lean at angles, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, their features softened as though turning back to dream. These are not monuments to conquest or wealth. They are elegies in stone. And then we come upon the greatest of them, all the unfinished moai, still lying flat, stretching over 20 meters in length. This is the colossus of Rongorongo, too large to ever have been moved, perhaps never intended to be. Some believe it was a final act of devotion, a last attempt to speak to the spirits when the world was shifting. But I wonder, dreamer, if it was always meant to remain. For here, upon this mountain, time becomes layered. You feel it in the wind that tastes of ancient fire. You sense it in the silence that falls between the birdsong. It is as though the mountain itself remembers everything every hand that carved, every voice that chanted, every eye that looked upon these stone faces with reverence and awe. To stand within Rongorongo is to step outside of history. It is to breathe the same air as those long vanished, to place your hand upon the same groove of stone, and to feel just for a moment that you, too, are part of the dream. And when night falls here, when the stars glimmer like beads scattered by a celestial hand, one can imagine the moai rising in spirit, turning their eyes to the heavens, listening once again to the forgotten songs that once shaped them. Now, as we turn from this sacred quarry and walk the ancient paths toward the sea, we follow the trail the moai once took, carried not by machines, but by men in ritual, belief in unity. In the next chapter, we journey with them to the process of transport, to the rituals of movement, and to the great mystery, how the moai walked. Along the sacred paths carved into Rapa Nui's volcanic body, a legend echoes with each step. The moai walked. This is no metaphor in the eyes of the old ones, no myth meant for children alone. To the descendants of those who shaped these stone giants, it is a truth wrapped in reverence. The moai, those massive solemn beings of basalt and tuff, did not simply lie upon wooden sledges or roll across logs. They danced, they stepped, they swayed. With great ceremony and sacred chant, the ancestors say, the moai made their way across the island in a rhythm only the devoted could understand. Close your eyes, dreamer. Imagine the sight. A procession moves beneath the sun, hundreds of hands guiding ropes, voices raised in slow chant. Dust swirls around the feet of the gathered, and at the center of it all, a giant stone figure tilts gently to one side. A call is made. It tilts the other way. Step by step, it sways forward like a child learning to walk, like an elder rising to dance once more. The ropes tighten and loosen in turn, a kind of sacred choreography. Each movement is a prayer. To watch this would be to witness not labor, but liturgy. Modern scholars have puzzled over how the statues were moved. Some have proposed wooden sledges dragged across cleared paths. Others suggest rolling them on logs, though the absence of trees in later centuries complicates such visions. But in recent times, a theory rooted in ancestral memory has returned to prominence. The moai walked through careful rocking, aided by ropes and balance. It is a theory that science now echoes, demonstrated by experiment, confirmed by physics. And yet, to focus on mechanics alone is to miss the soul of the act. For, to the people of Rapa Nui, the Moai did not merely travel, they migrated. They were led, accompanied by ritual, offered songs to guide their steps. Some say each clan had its own path. Along these sacred routes, stones were placed, water offered, chants sung, and where a Moai fell, whether from accident or omen, it was left where it lay. To this day, toppled statues still rest by ancient paths, their journeys unfinished, their stories whispered only in the rustle of grass. Walking with these Moai was not a task, it was communion. Each movement honored the ancestor whose spirit the Moai carried. Each step was a binding of past and present, a tether between sky and soil. Even now, when the wind whistles across the hills, it sounds almost like voices chanting in time. Perhaps, in some sacred way, the stones still remember their dance. And what of those who guided them, the Tangata, the people of the hands, those who bore the ropes and bore the songs? Their work was not measured in strength alone, but in patience and harmony. They trusted the Moai, they believed. It is said the most skilled among them knew the mountain's rhythm, the stone's mood, and the breath of the land beneath their feet. They moved with awareness so deep it bordered on the divine. No command was shouted, no violence was done, only reverence. There is a haunting beauty in this Vijuna society so aligned with its own spiritual center that it could move mountains with song, that it could bring giants to life, not with conquest, but with collective faith. In the quiet of the present day, if you walk these same paths, you may feel it. The air seems thicker where the Moai once passed. The earth remembers the weight of devotion. Footprints long vanished still echo in the rhythm of the wind. And always, the face is calm, watching, enduring. At the end of each journey stood an ahu, the sacred platform upon which the Moai would be raised. These were not mere stages, but altars, thresholds between the worlds of flesh and spirit. To reach them was not an ending, but a new beginning, a vigil that would last until the end of time. And so, in the next chapter we arrive at these platforms, these sentinels, by the sea. Let us stand before the Moai in their final resting places, and listen to what they see. They stand with their backs to the sea. In long, silent rows, the Moai face inward toward the land, toward the people who once lived beneath their gaze. They do not look to the horizon for invaders or passing ships. Instead, their stony eyes rest upon the earth, the villages, the vanished homes and hearths of a civilization now held only in the breath of wind. This dreamer is not a mistake. Each Moai was placed upon an ahu, a ceremonial platform carefully aligned with landforms, starlines, and the spiritual rhythms of the earth. These were not arbitrary stages. They were sacred points of convergence, places where energy pooled, where memory lingered. Raised from stone and coral, decorated with intricate stonework, the ahu were both foundation and portal. The Moai stood upon these altars not to command, but to protect. Their role was not that of ruler, but of ancestor. Their gaze was a blessing, a watchful presence. They were guardians of fertility, of harmony, of continuity between the living and the dead. To be watched by a Moai was to be remembered, and their eyes held more than silence. Though today many stand eyeless, weathered by time and stripped of adornment, once their sockets were filled with white coral and obsidian pupils. These eyes were not simply decoration. When set in place, it is said, the Moai awakened. They received the mana, the spiritual force of the ancestor they embodied. With the eyes they did not simply see, they watched, they witnessed, they remembered. At Ahu Tongariki, the largest platform on the island, 15 Moai stand in solemn procession. Their backs are broad against the sea breeze, their faces turned toward the hills. Once a village flourished there, tended by generations who lived under their gaze. The Moai did not move, yet they were never still. In the minds of the people, they pulsed with presence. Children were born beneath their shadows. Songs were sung to their memory. Offerings were laid at their feet. Even in times of hardship, when the forests dwindled and the waters grew lean, the Moai remained. The people turned to them not for answers, but for grounding. They were the keepers of time, the living embodiment of all who came before. And perhaps this is why they did not face the sea. The sea brought uncertainty. The sea was movement, change, the unknown, but the land that was home. That was where ancestors were buried, where lineages were traced, where firelight danced against the cave walls in sacred retelling. The Moai watched over this. They faced what mattered most. Some Moai wore pukao, cylindrical topknots made of red scoria, a volcanic stone. These were not hats, but symbols of status and sacredness. possibly echoing hairstyles worn by the living chiefs of long ago. Like crowns of memory, they elevated the ancestors to divine prominence, linking earth to sky. And then, one day, they fell. When the world on the island began to change, whether from famine, from division, from outside contact, many Moai were toppled. The reasons remain entangled in debate. Some say interclan rivalry sparked violence, others believe European arrivals shifted balance irreparably. But beneath it all, there is sorrow. To knock down a Moai was to sever a line of memory. It was to lose the eyes that once watched. Today, some have been raised again, restored by modern hands. Others still lie face down in the earth, their stories muffled beneath moss and silence. And yet, even so, they endure. Their presence cannot be erased. As you stand before them, dreamer, feel the hush of their watchfulness. The sea behind you whispers change. But before you, in stone and stillness, is remembrance. Their eyes may no longer gleam, but their vision persists in the bones of the land. And so we leave them for now, these watchers, these silent sentinels of forgotten prayers. Ahead lies the echo of those prayers, carried in language, carved in caves, remembered in chant. In the next chapter, we enter the sacred caverns and rock shelters, where the Rapa Nui people left behind symbols more subtle, yet no less profound. Let us descend into the darkness and find the light of meaning. Beneath the open sky and the steadfast gaze of the Moai, lies another realm, one hidden, intimate, and sacred. It is a world beneath the surface of Rapa Nui, where the wind quiets, the sunlight fades, and only memory lingers. The people of this island, whose ancestors walked the waves and carved giants from mountains, also turned inward, into the earth, into caves, into stone. These caverns and lava tubes formed by ancient volcanic flows became sanctuaries of meaning, not only shelters from wind and weather, but vessels of spirit and story. Within these stone wombs the Rapa Nui etched the language of their hearts, not in books or scrolls, but in symbols and silhouettes, carved into the walls of caves and etched onto boulders near the sea. These symbols whisper across time. Spirals, birds, canoes, stars, and faces emerge from stone like dreams caught in sleep. They are not merely decoration, they are prayers, records, echoes. One of the most powerful of these symbols is the Tongata Manuth. The figure is unmistakable. A crouching man with the head of a frigate bird or tern, his limbs curved in motion, wings outstretched as though poised between flight and fall. This motif appears again and again in the sacred village of Orongo high above the sea, where cliffs meet sky and the souls of ancestors are said to soar. The Birdman represents a time when the Moai no longer held supreme spiritual sway, when the island, in struggle and search, turned to new rituals to restore balance. But here, in the quiet darkness of the caves, the Birdman and other symbols take on a deeper tone. They are not announcements, they are meditations, private expressions of the sacred. Imagine the artist crouched in the dim, the stone cool beneath bare feet. A flame flickers nearby, casting wavering shadows along the wall. The carver traces each line slowly, not in haste, but in rhythm with breath. Around him, the cave listens. It remembers. The Birdman is joined by images of ray mirror crescent-shaped ornaments worn by high-ranking individuals. Also carved are turtles, fish, eyes, and the faces of long-lost gods. Some designs seem abstract, spiraling inward like thoughts too old for words. Many scholars have tried to interpret these carvings. Were they records of lineage, astronomical codes, ritual markers? Perhaps all these things, or perhaps none. Sometimes, dreamer, symbols are not meant to be solved but felt. The caves themselves echo with that silence. At Anakai Tangata, a sea cave near Hangaroa, ancient pigments still cling to the ceiling. Here, red and black Manutara, birds glide across volcanic stone. Their wings stretch across time. Their meaning remains elusive, yet you can feel it in the gut, in the hush, in the ache. These were not isolated expressions. Across the island, nearly 5,000 petroglyphs have been recorded, each one a voice, each one a star in the sky of the past. Some caves were used for ritual, others for refuge, some perhaps as burial chambers or places of birth. The line between sacred and mundane was never sharply drawn. Life on Rapa Nui was woven through with reverence. Even the act of entering the earth, descending into her hidden chambers, was an act of humility. One cave, Anate Pahu, stretches deep beneath the surface, with multiple chambers, lava benches, and cool, silent air. Trees grow at its mouth, figs, bananas roots pushing into shadow. Inside, time slows to breath and heartbeat. To sit in that darkness is to feel the pulse of the island herself. These were places where memory lived, not in stories told aloud, but in scratches and symbols, in soot and shadow. Even now, archaeologists and historians tread lightly in these spaces, knowing they are not merely historical artifacts, they are sanctuaries, places where whispers linger. As we emerge once more into the light, let us carry with us the hush of the caves, the memory of hands against stone, of dreams made visible in curling lines and sacred birds, for the next mystery awaits not in darkness, but beneath the sun, in a script etched into wood and still barely understood. In the next chapter, we unravel the enigma of Rongorongo, the written language that may have been, or may still be, waiting to speak. Not all mysteries lie in shadows. Some are carved in daylight, upon driftwood and tablets, speaking a language no living voice can yet decipher. These are the Rongorongo glyphs, the lost script of Rapa Nui, etched in flowing curves and strange figures, echoing a language the earth remembers but the present cannot fully translate. Rongorongo means to chant out, or to recite, and it was more than writing. It was performance, memory, and ceremony woven into wood. These glyphs were not written idly. They were carved with purpose, read aloud in sacred cadence, each figure a step in the choreography of ancestral knowledge, and then ... silence. No one today can read Rongorongo with certainty. It remains one of the world's great undeciphered scripts, its meanings curled inside its elegant shapes like seeds waiting for the right season. Close your eyes, dreamer, and imagine a priest-scholar of ancient Rapa Nui seated before a long tablet of dark wood, the surface smoothed by generations. His fingers trace the line of glyphs, rows of birds, fish, plants, and human forms, each symbol flowing into the next like ripples in water. He chants slowly, eyes half closed, calling forth histories and genealogies from the wood. The figures seem to move, some standing, some kneeling, all arranged in alternating directions. This style is called reverse boustrophedone, a rare and complex layout, in which every other line is mirrored, to be read in a serpentine path, a dance of the mind, a labyrinth of meaning. Where did it come from, and when? Some believe Rongorongo was inspired by early European contact, perhaps attempts to mimic Latin script brought by missionaries, but others suggest it may predate such encounters, a homegrown evolution of a civilization rooted deeply in oral tradition, suddenly compelled to carve its stories into wood. Only 24 or so authentic Rongorongo texts survive. Most are held in museums far from the island, in Santiago, in Vienna, in Honolulu, in the Vatican. They rest behind glass now, silent and inert, their voices muffled by distance and time. The glyphs depict stylized beings, men with elongated heads, animals in profile, eyes without pupils, hands raised or joined. Some sit upon thrones, some appear with staffs or birds. Some are seen sprouting leaves, others merging with celestial forms. Patterns emerge, but meanings remain elusive. Scholars have tried for decades to crack the code. Some see astronomical charts, others suspect ritual calendars, genealogies, or agricultural records. There are whispers that the tablets hold chants once used in initiation ceremonies or even rites of power, but for now, Rongorongo resists translation. It speaks in a tongue remembered only by stone and sky. Yet the mystery is not a void. It is an invitation. Each glyph is a doorway, each unread line a breath held for centuries. And when the wind rustles through the palms of Rapa Nui today, it is tempting to believe the language still lingers dispersed into the elements, waiting for ears that can hear. Even in silence, the script exerts power. In 1864, missionaries arrived with crosses and catechisms. They banned the old chants, they discouraged the carving of glyphs. In time, the sacred tablets were hidden, forgotten, or burned. Oral traditions frayed, the scribes vanished, and with them, the key to Rongorongo, but fragments remain. In the gestures of dancers reenacting ancient ceremonies, in the hushed reverence of elders when the subject arises, in the quiet yearning of scholars piecing together patterns beneath flickering lamplight, and perhaps, just perhaps, in the dreams of those who sleep near the Moai. What if this script was never meant to be read by eyes alone? What if it was a language of dreaming, a bridge between the seen and the unseen? As we leave behind the flowing glyphs, let us carry their mystery with us, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a song unfinished. Their silence is not absence, but presence. In the next chapter, we ascend to Orongo, the ceremonial village high on the cliffs where the Birdman cult once took flight, and the people looked not to the land but to the sea and the sky for renewal. Where the land rises in final defiance of the sea, where earth becomes edge and sky embraces salt wind. There lies a place carved from the bones of dreams, Orongo, perched upon the southwestern rim of the Rano cow crater, high above crashing waves and circling seabirds. This ceremonial village is unlike any other on Rapa Nui. Here, at the threshold between sky and ocean, between life and death, the people once gathered to watch the heavens and speak with birds. It is a place of stone and spirit. Orongo emerged in a time of change, when the forests had vanished, when the Moai had fallen, when hunger and conflict whispered through the land like a second wind. The people turned their eyes upward, and they found in the frigate bird Manutara a symbol of renewal. So began the cult of the Birdman. Close your eyes, dreamer. Stand beside me on the windswept cliffs of Orongo. The sea crashes far below, frothing against the black rocks of the Islets Motu Nui, Motu and Motu, Kau 3 shards of volcanic stone rising like teeth from the deep. The sky is wide, vast, endless, and on this precipice, dozens of low stone houses, curved like sleeping seals, huddle against the wind. Within these houses, pilgrims once waited in darkness. They fasted, prayed, and prepared to witness a sacred contest, one that would determine not only leadership, but the island's connection to the divine. Each year, when the Manutara bird returned to nest on Motu Nui, the clans of Rapa Nui gathered at Orongo for the Tangata Manu ritual, the Birdman ceremony. Each clan would choose a champion, usually a strong, skilled man who would climb down the sheer cliff, swim across shark-infested waters, and wait among the rocks of Motu Nui for the first egg of the season. The winner was not the swimmer, but the first to retrieve a Manutara egg and bring it back intact to Orongo. He would scale the cliffs again, bleeding and salt-stained, and present the egg to his patron. That patron became the Tangata Manu, the Birdman, the spiritual leader for the year, a man believed to be imbued with sacred power. His head would be shaved, painted in red and white, and he would live in seclusion, communing with the spirits and ensuring the island's balance. This ritual replaced the Moai as the central axis of belief. It was a living ceremony, visceral and dangerous, rooted in the land but lifted toward the sky. And Orongo was its sacred theater. Walk now among the petroglyphs etched into the basalt walls. The Birdman appears again and again, his arms transformed to wings, his head elongated into a beak, his body curved like a question. Around him dance symbols of fertility, of sun and sea, of ancestral power. The lines are ancient, but their energy still hums beneath your fingers. Some say the Birdman represented not only spiritual leadership, but a resurrection of sorts, a rebirth from suffering, a flight from despair. When the island could no longer look to the Moai for guidance, it turned to the heavens. Orongo's location itself speaks of transcendence. One side opens to the yawning crater of Rongorongo, with its freshwater lake rimmed by reeds and whispers. The other side plunges into the Pacific, limitless and wild. To stand here is to feel between worlds, earth and water, death and dreaming, stone and sky. No other site on Rapa Nui speaks so clearly of transformation. And yet, as time passed, even this sacred ceremony began to fade. European influence grew. Missionaries banned the old ways. Diseases swept through the island. The last recorded Birdman ceremony was held in the 1860s. The houses fell empty. The chants fell silent. But Orongo did not forget. The stones remained. The petroglyphs still watch. The islets still wait for the birds, and the wind still carries the memory of wings. When you dream tonight, perhaps you will find yourself standing once more upon these cliffs, the sea swirling below, the sky expanding above. The Birdman will not speak, but you will feel his presence in the hush, in the ascent, in the space between your breath and the stars. As we descend from this sacred height, we turn now to the sea, to the canoes that once brought life, and the people who crossed unthinkable distances to shape this island's fate. In the next chapter, we follow the ancient voyagers who arrived upon Rapa Nui's shores and left behind more than footprints. Before the Moai stood, before Orongo touched the sky, before a single glyph was carved into stone, there were the canoes. Long before Western maps dared chart the South Pacific's vastness, the ocean was already known intimately, reverently by those who danced across its surface with nothing but stars above and memory within. The people who came to Rapa Nui were not lost. They were led. They were the navigators of silence. Close your eyes, dreamer, and drift backward through the tides of time. Imagine the expanse, an endless ocean, blue upon blue, horizon blurred with sky. And then, breaking that stillness, a double-hulled canoe, graceful and sure, slicing through waves as though guided by an invisible hand. No metal, no compass, only the ancient art of wayfaring. The people aboard these vessels came from Hiva, or perhaps Mangareva, the Marquesas, or another now forgotten cradle of Polynesian life. They followed the birds, the swells, the colors of cloud and foam. They read the language of currents. The ocean was their map, the night sky, their library. These were not desperate wanderers. They were intentional voyagers. Their canoes held families, animals, plants, sacred stones, stories. They brought with them not just survival but civilization. And when they found Rapa Nui, they knew, an island unlike any other, remote, yes but alive. The volcanoes breathed warmth beneath their feet. The forests rose like temples. The sky opened wide and generous. They called it Te Pito o Te Hanutha, navel of the world. And there they made a life. The voyaging canoes were beached, then transformed. Their timbers became homes. The seeds they carried blossomed into taro, sweet potato, and banana. The chants they sung upon the sea were now sung at birth and burial. And the skills that led them across the deep were passed from tongue to tongue, generation to generation, like precious shells. The knowledge of navigation was sacred. Not everyone held it. It was the domain of the Tara, the wisdom keepers who memorized patterns of stars, the shapes of swells, the behaviors of seabirds. They could feel changes in the wind through the bones of their face. They could smell land in the breath of the breeze. They were historians of the horizon. But over time, the ocean turned inward. As the island's resources dwindled, and its trees disappeared, the canoes were no longer built. The once vast network of travel across Polynesia narrowed to solitude. Rapa Nui became a world unto itself, a single stone adrift. The navigator's art was not forgotten, but it fell quiet, like a sacred song sung only in dreams. And yet, even today, echoes of that oceanic past linger, in the design of the stone chicken houses, in the curvature of moai lips that resemble canoe prows, in the orientation of ceremonial platforms that mirror constellations once used for sailing. The very shape of the island, long and lean, reminds one of a vessel, as if Rapa Nui itself is a canoe forever gliding through time. There are stories still told by the elders of Hoto Matua, the legendary chief who led the first voyage, of how he arrived upon the eastern shore, his sails torn by skyfire, his eyes reflecting stars. He did not conquer the land, he communed with it. And perhaps this, more than anything, defines the ancient voyagers, not just their skill, but their reverence. They did not cross the ocean to dominate, but to join with the sacred fabric of new worlds. Their arrival was not an invasion, but a whisper. As you float now in your imagination, rocked gently by invisible waves, let the stars shine above you like the memories of those who crossed before. Let the breath of the sea lull you into that sacred rhythm, the one known only to those who sail not by tools, but by trust. For in the next chapter we will explore the balance these people once maintained, the sacred dance between human life and the land itself, before the forests vanished and the moai fell. There was a time when the land and the people breathed together, each rise and fall of chest mirroring the hills and valleys of Rapa Nui. The wind moved through the palms like sacred chants. Rain fell not as intrusion but as renewal. The soil yielded fruit in rhythm with the stars. And the stone whispered stories to those who knew how to listen. This was the island before imbalance, the island in sacred harmony. The people lived in small, clan-based communities, each with their own sacred moai, their own ahu, and their own lineage stretching back to the founding navigators. Yet rather than division, this fostered a tapestry of interconnected respect. The island's land was divided like a great body-edge clan tending their part with care, ensuring that the whole remained strong. Caves provided shelter, the sea offered fish and shellfish. Gardens Manavai were carefully cultivated, surrounded by stone walls to protect the crops from wind and salt. These circular enclosures were not only practical but ceremonial. Each one was a little universe, balanced and alive. Animals were few. The Rapa Nui raised chickens in stone-built hair, moa small, dome-shaped houses that protected the birds from theft and harsh sun. These houses, some still visible today, speak of ingenuity and subtlety, a culture that learned to adapt with care. Even waste was returned to the land in cyclical reverence. Ash from fires nourished the earth. Bones were buried with ritual. Nothing was discarded thoughtlessly. And the people themselves, they lived in hair boat-shaped houses made of thatch and supported by wooden frameworks. Their form a reflection of the double-hulled canoes that once carried them across the sea. These homes curved like gentle cradles, low to the ground, embracing the wind rather than defying it. Daily life was not frantic, it was circular. Time was marked by the sun, the tide, the flowering of plants, the migration of birds. Children were taught the chants of their ancestors, the myths of the sky, the meanings hidden in stone and glyph. Every act from planting taro to painting bodies for ceremony was a form of communion. And always, the moai watched, To live under their gaze was to remember that one was never alone. The ancestors were present not as ghosts, but as guiding spirits, embedded in the land, in the clouds, in the rhythm of the drums. Rituals abounded. The Rapa Nui danced, sang, carved, and gathered beneath the moon. Tattooing was common, not as ornament but as identity, which line a statement of clan, story, and rank. Even silence held meaning. To sit in quiet with a moai or by the sea was to participate in a dialogue older than language. In this time of balance, there were no great walls, no fortresses, no war as we think of it. Disputes were settled through competition, through ceremony, through shared respect for the island's limited bounty. The people knew the land's gifts were not infinite, they were sacred, and so they listened. To the birds whose returns signaled the changing seasons, to the clouds whose shapes foretold weather, to the ancestors whose voices spoke through dreams. This was the Rapa Nui of harmony, a place where even the wind seemed to carry wisdom, a time when the stone, the soil, and the spirit moved as one. But as all dreamers know, harmony is delicate. The seeds of imbalance, though invisible at first, had already begun to root. A few more trees were cut, a few more moai were demanded. The land, ever generous, yielded until it could no longer. But let us not hurry toward that sorrow. Tonight we linger in the memory of balance, of families gathered beneath palm fronds, of hands passing food in silence, of elders teaching the young by firelight. Let us remember the sound of a single wave rolling in under a sky of unbroken stars. In the next chapter, we will follow the thread of change, the slow unraveling of this harmony, and how the very guardians of the island, the moai, began to fall. They had stood for centuries silent, watching, unwavering, but one by one, they began to fall, not all at once, not in chaos, but in a long, sorrowful rhythm, like ancient trees bowing beneath the weight of forgotten prayers. The moai, once lifted with reverence and purpose, now lay face down upon the earth they once protected. Their descent was not just physical, it was spiritual, it was cultural. It was a moment when the axis of Rapa Nui tilted, not in the sky but in the soul. The reasons, as with all sacred unravelings, are layered and elusive. Let us walk, dreamer, through the hush of these fallen titans. Imagine a landscape littered with memory, massive heads half buried in grass, torsos cracked by time, coral eyes lost to the sea. The platforms once swept clean and adorned with offerings, now grow moss and solitude. The air is heavy here, even the birds seem to sing softer. So what happened? Some say the answer lies in the forest. As the population grew and the demand for moai increased, more trees were cut to transport these massive statues. The great palms that once covered the island vanished. Without them, the soil eroded, the gardens struggled, the canoes could no longer be built. The island, once a green sanctuary, became a bare and brittle plain. Hunger followed, and with hunger, desperation. Clans that had once lived in relative balance began to compete more fiercely for land, for resources, for spiritual favor. The moai, once symbols of unity and protection, became points of rivalry. Bigger, heavier, taller, each one a claim to prestige. But when the land could no longer sustain the weight of ambition, the reverence began to crack. Some legends speak of internal strife, of wars between clans, of rebels toppling moai to dishonor rivals, to break the manner of their ancestors, of ceremonies abandoned, of chants turning to silence. Others suggest the fall of the moai was not driven by violence, but by necessity. The people may have simply lost the ability to raise or maintain them. Without ropes, without wood, without unity, the sacred art of elevation faded, and the moai, left unfinished or unstable, succumbed to time. In either case, the result was the same. Where once the island was a gallery of stone faces gazing inland, it became a graveyard of memory. Some moai remain shattered at the bases of cliffs. Others lie at awkward angles along ancient paths, as if they tripped mid-journey and were never lifted again. And yet, even in their fall, they do not lose their power. There is something achingly human in their descent. Once divine, now weathered. Once proud, now humbled. They echo not just the fate of a civilization, but the arc of all things rising, reaching, receding. Even the greatest guardians must rest. The people, too, changed. With the moai fallen, attention shifted to new rituals like the Birdman ceremonies at Orongo. Spiritual energy dispersed, seeking new forms, but something essential had been lost. The connection between ancestor and soil was fractured. The eyes that watched the land had closed, and yet, even toppled, the moai remained. They were never forgotten, they were not erased. Their presence lingered like smoke after fire, visible, scented, sacred. In time, Foreign ships would arrive, new tongues would speak strange names, diseases would come, converts, chains, but none of them would erase the stone, because stone remembers. And so tonight, as we lie beside these fallen giants, let us listen, not for sound but for weight, for the quiet gravity of history, for the wisdom that lingers in silence, for the truth that nothing sacred ever truly disappears. In the next chapter, we will step forward into the era of first contact when European ships reached Rapa Nui's shores, bringing awe, confusion, and a deep, irreversible shift. It began with white on the horizon, not clouds, nor birds, but sails strange cloth catching the wind in unfamiliar ways. The sea, so long a mirror to stars and spirits, now bore vessels that did not belong to the sacred currents, and upon those vessels came men whose faces were foreign, whose intentions were veiled, and whose arrival would mark a turning that no chant could still. This was the age of contact. When the shadows of European ships first touched the shores of Rapa Nui, the island had already begun to quiet. The forests were gone, the moai lay scattered, and the people lived with fewer words and deeper wounds. Yet life remained, songs still passed through the air, gardens still yielded, and the ocean still gave what it could. Then, in 1722, the Dutch admiral Jacob Roggeveen made landfall on Easter Sunday. He saw statues, not people. To him, Rapa Nui was a puzzle, its great stone figures, defying expectation, its small human population seeming disconnected from the monuments that loomed above them. He recorded their appearance, their bare state, their caution. But he did not understand, he could not, and thus, the island was renamed Easter Island, its sacred name replaced by a calendar. But Roggeveen was only the beginning. More ships followed, Spanish, British, French. Each brought with them mirrors, nails, and rifles. Each took away stories, carvings, and people. Some came in peace, others did not. The islanders, curious and cautious, greeted them with dance and gift, with silence and side-eye. They had seen change before, but not like this. The newcomers measured time in hours, not in moons. They sought maps, conversions, and claims, not dreams. They asked questions, but did not listen, and still, the people endured. But the greatest wound was yet to come. In the mid-1800s, slave raids from Peru descended upon the island. Hundreds were taken, men, women, children, elders. The sacred wisdom keepers, the last to understand Rongorongo, were dragged onto ships, never to return. The chants were interrupted, the sacred names forgotten. A library of breath, erased. When those who survived the ordeal were returned, they brought with them sickness. Smallpox swept across the land, cutting through what remained of the population like a cold, merciless wind. Families vanished, villages emptied. The moai stared on, mute and still. And then came the missionaries. They built churches where Ahu had once stood. They taught new songs, new names for old things. They condemned tattoos and toppled ceremonies. In their fervor they gathered the sacred Rongorongo tablets and either sent them far away, or burned them. By the late 19th century, Rapa Nui was no longer its own. It had become a name on a map, a possession, a place visited but no longer heard. The people were relocated, herded into a single settlement. The rest of the island became pasture, leased to foreign ranchers. Fences were built, fences on an island that once belonged to no one but the ancestors. And yet, the heartbeat never stopped. Even in the wake of disease, theft, and erasure, the Rapa Nui people remembered, quietly, in bone, in gaze, in wind. They passed stories in lullabies, hid carvings in caves, held fast to names and lineages that no colonizer could pronounce. They became living stone. And now, dreamer, when tourists walk among the moai, when scholars try to piece together timelines, they look through a veil of loss. But you, tonight, may see through the breath of dreams. See the moai not just as fallen statues, but as standing ancestors. See the people not as victims of history, but as survivors of time. Let us now step into the age of memory and revival. For though the island grew quiet, the voice of Rapa Nui was never fully silenced. In the next chapter, we will listen to how the spirit returned, how a forgotten culture began to remember itself. Ashes are not endings, they are beginnings in disguise. Even when fire has passed and silence has settled, something remains. Beneath the layers of loss, of stolen names and broken songs, memory lies waiting, not buried, but resting, like coals glowing quietly beneath the dust. And on Rapa Nui, that glow never faded, it only dimmed, for a time. This chapter, dear dreamer, is about the ember that never died. The Rapa Nui people endured more than erasure. They endured displacement, isolation, and spiritual dismemberment. Their island, once open and shared, was fenced off. The ahu became pasture stones. The moai became curiosities for foreign eyes. And their language, their chants, their sacred dances were replaced with sermons from beyond the sea. But not everything was lost. Because memory on Rapa Nui is not just held in books or names, it is held in the body, in gesture, in rhythm, in silence. The elders became the secret keepers. They remembered the smell of Umu Pyeth ovens dug for feasting. They remembered the movement of hips and shoulders in the old dances, the tension of rope in ancestral ceremonies, the way to draw a line in the earth that marked more than just direction, it marked belonging. In whispered tones, they recalled the names of the winds, the patterns of the swells, the gods who once watched from the mountain peaks. They told the children not to forget, even when the words were forbidden, even when the visitors laughed, even when the sacred sites were trampled by boots that did not listen. And so memory survived not in volume but in shadows, and shadows, dreamer, are where rebirth begins. In the 20th century, change came quietly, first as awareness, then as awakening. Scholars began to see not just statues and strangeness, but a complex, rich civilization whose knowledge extended far beyond stone. Activists and historians from within the Rapa Nui community began to reclaim their past not just as artifacts, but as breath. The language once feared forgotten was revived. Young people began to learn Rapa Nui in schools. Dances once performed only in secret were brought to festivals not for tourists, but for honor. The Birdman cult, long silenced, was remembered in pageant and chant. Though no longer sacred in the old sense, its stories took on new meaning as heritage, as identity, as defiance. In 1966, a milestone was reached. For the first time in generations, the Rapa Nui people were granted citizenship within their own land. The fences began to fall. The island was no longer simply a museum or pasture but a home. Once again, descendants of stonecarvers began to carve a nunat moai, but wood, tattoos, dance. Artists shaped modern forms with ancestral lines. Musicians sang in Rapa Nui tongue, voices lifting above the roar of the ocean like the return of the sacred birds. The memory beneath the ashes rose like smoke, curling upward, and the moai they watched. Some were re-erected with care using modern tools. Yes, but also with ancient reverence. Ahu Tongariki, once destroyed by a tsunami, now stands again, a row of solemn watchers facing inland. Though they are silent, the people feel their gaze once more. They feel the old eyes watching and remembering. In 2017, something remarkable happened. A young Rapa Nui woman named Mahani Tive, a concert pianist trained in Europe, returned to her island to build a music school, not to flee to the world but to bring the world back to Rapa Nui. Her hands, shaped by the rhythms of Chopin and Bach, now teach children the rhythms of both ocean and piano. This is how memory moves. Not just backward, but forward. It evolves, it breathes. Even the glyphs of Rongorongo, though still unread, inspire curiosity and awe. New generations look upon them not as broken riddles but as sacred inheritance. The mystery itself becomes part of the identity. Not everything must be solved. Some things are meant to be held. So tonight, dreamer, remember this. Rapa Nui is not just a fallen world. It is a remembering world. A world rising slowly, like mist from the crater, like song from the lips of a grandmother telling her grandchild about the stone that once spoke. The moai remain not as relics but as reminders, that memory is stronger than silence, and that even when the sacred is trampled, it finds a way to return through dream, through breath, through the quiet hands of those who remember. Let us now turn toward those guardians again, toward the stone faces that have seen all. In the next chapter, we will speak not of their fall or their mystery, but of their meaning. They gaze without blinking, they watch without judgment. They endure not only the passing of time, but the changes in those who look upon them. The moai are more than stone. They are silence given shape. And at the heart of that silence lies a question, endlessly asked in whispers, in research, in reverent awe. What do they see? And perhaps more importantly, what do they mean? To the outside world, the moai have long been puzzles. Scholars have measured their dimensions, traced their origins, theorized about their movement. Too many, they are architectural enigmas, evidence of lost technologies or forgotten ingenuity. But to those who walk in dreams, to those who breathe with reverence for the sacred, the moai are not problems to be solved. They are presences to be honored. Let us return, dreamer, to one of them now, not as a tourist, not as a scholar, but as a soul in search of stillness. Stand before a moai as dawn breaks. The sky is soft with light. The sea hushes behind you. The Moai rises from its ahu like a mountain shaped by memory. Its face, elongated and stern, is not cold, it is contemplative. Its eyes now hollow, once held coral and obsidian, shimmering with ancestral presence. And here, before that gaze, you begin to feel it. The Moai is not looking at the land, it is looking into it. Into you. The eyes of the Moai were not carved merely to observe. They were the threshold, the point where mana, spiritual energy, flowed from the ancestor into the world of the living. The moment the coral eyes were placed, the Moai became alive. It remembered. It watched. It blessed. Their expressions are neither joyous nor mournful. They are something deeper. They are serene. This serenity has power. In a world that turns too quickly, that demands answers and explanations, the Moai invite us to pause, to consider, to exist. Their silence does not mean absence, it means depth. They hold the stories of those who have passed, not in words, but in being. They are presence, made permanent. Each Moai represents an ancestor, not a deity, not a god, but a person once beloved, once wise, once honored. These ancestors, elevated in stone, continued to guide and guard. Their placement on the ahu was not arbitrary, it aligned with stars, with sacred geography, with spiritual tides. Each angle meant something. Each position was a statement, and though the carvings differ, some tall and slender, others short and stout, they all share the same dignity. They all whisper the same truth. You are not alone. In a deeper sense, the Moai are mirrors. What you see in them reflects what you carry within. Stand before one in sorrow, and it offers stillness. Stand in wonder, and it echoes wonder back. Stand with reverence, and you will feel the ground beneath you soften, as though the land itself recognizes your humility. This is their true meaning. Not simply to remember the past, but to hold space for the present. To remind us, always, that the world is older than we are. That wisdom comes not in noise, but in quiet. That endurance is not resistance, but grace. The Rapa Nui people understood this. Their ancestors did not disappear, they transformed. And through the Moai they remained rooted in the world, like trees of stone, like prayers that do not need words. So when you next see an image of a Moai, let it be more than curiosity. Let it be communion. Let it be a moment to return to breath, to earth, to presence. Because within those empty eyes is a fullness the world has forgotten. And as we turn now toward the landscape that surrounds them, toward the island itself, its cliffs and plains and sacred stones, we begin to see not a backdrop, but a living altar. In the next chapter, we will walk the island as a temple, and explore how every feature of Rapa Nui was shaped not by chance, but by spirit. To walk across Rapa Nui is not to stroll across earth alone. It is to step upon a temple. Every stone, every slope, every shadowed crevice of the island is sacred, arranged by hand, yes, but also by spirit. To the Rapa Nui ancestors, land was not background, it was body, it was breath. The island itself was a living being, and they tended it as one tends a sacred shrine. This is what we must understand now, dreamer. The island was not simply where they lived, it was how they lived. From the very beginning, the people of Rapa Nui imbued their home with intention. They did not build upon the land casually. Each ahu platform, each Moai, each garden wall and cave was placed with a reverence shaped by starlight, by seasons, by sacred lineage. Let us begin with the island's bones. 3 main volcanoes form the triangular shape of Rapa Nui: Teravaka in the north, Poik in the east, and Rongorongo in the south. These were more than geological features. They were ancestral guardians, pillars of the land's spirit. From their peaks, the people watched the skies, traced the paths of birds, and aligned their lives with the cosmos. Between these points, lines were drawn not with chalk or stone, but with meaning. These lines connected sacred spaces. Ahu platforms were placed along these axes, forming geometric relationships too precise to be coincidence. It is as if the island were a great compass or a star chart etched upon the earth itself. The placement of the Moai followed this logic. Not all faced the same way, but all faced with purpose. Some aligned with solstices, others with lunar events. A few pointed toward distant islands now forgotten, their gaze stretching across water like memory held in stone. The gardens too were sacred geometry. Manavai, the circular walled enclosures that protected crops, were not only functional, their shape echoed the sun, the womb, the cyclical breath of time. The walls, made from volcanic rock, absorbed heat and shielded plants from wind, creating miniature climates. But they also enclosed sacred space, little altars of growth. Caves and lava tubes were portals. Some were used for burial, others for birthing, still others for meditation and refuge. Within them, the stone was carved with symbols, the air thick with ancient breath. These were not holes in the earth, they were entrances into deeper understanding. It was said that knowledge lived in the dark, and those who dared enter with humility would emerge with vision. And everywhere always the sea. The island's edges were not limits, they were thresholds. From the cliffs of Orongo to the beaches of Anakina, the water was both a memory and a promise. It connected the Rapa Nui not only to their past voyages, but to the gods, the sky, the vast mystery beyond. In this way, Rapa Nui was a sacred map, a temple whose architecture was the land itself. The people did not separate the sacred from the ordinary. To plant was to pray, to carve was to invoke, to sit in silence was to enter ceremony. Even daily movements drawing water, weaving mats, gathering fruit were part of the larger ritual of honoring the land. And so the island pulsed with life. Even now, if you walk with slow feet and quiet breath, you will feel it. A rhythm beneath your steps, a presence in the wind, a whisper at the edge of sound. Modern eyes often see the Moai as ruins, the Ahu as relics, the petroglyphs as curiosities, but to those who remember to the Rapa Nui who dream in stone and chant, the island remains whole, not untouched, but unbroken. A temple still breathes, even in silence. Tonight, as you drift deeper into contemplation, imagine the island glowing softly beneath a canopy of stars, each Moai a candle, each Ahu a prayer, the paths between them forming constellations upon the earth. You are not walking across a forgotten world, you are entering a sacred one. In the next chapter, we will listen to the wisdom encoded in these forms, the ancestral knowledge of balance, of time, of being that still echoes through stone and soil. Stones do not speak in words, and yet they remember. In their silence is a memory deeper than paper, deeper than ink. The stones of Rapa Nui do not merely mark the past, they carry it, cradle it, whisper it to those who listen, not with ears, but with stillness. Tonight, dear dreamer, let us listen to them, let us listen to the wisdom of the stones. Across the island, in scattered fields and on sacred platforms, stones form lines, walls, circles, and faces. They lie embedded in the earth, like thoughts half-formed, waiting for breath to awaken them. Each one placed by a hand long gone, each one holding a story not yet finished. The Moai, of course, are the most visible expression of this stone wisdom, but even the smallest pebble in a sacred wall carries intention. Each was shaped not only by tools, but by time, by ritual, by reverence. The Rapa Nui did not believe stone was lifeless. They saw in it the bones of the earth, the breath of ancestors, the enduring voice of creation itself. To carve into stone was not to take it, was to commune, and in this act of communion, wisdom was exchanged. Let us look more closely. At Ahu platforms like Ahu Vainapu we see stones fit together with such precision, their seams vanish. This kind of masonry interlocking blocks, beveled and balanced, speaks of patience and understanding, of knowledge passed hand to hand, generation to generation, of how to feel the energy in a stone before lifting it, of how to let the land guide the structure, not resist it. These walls, dreamer, were not simply built. They were grown, each stone selected as if from a sacred orchard. Then there is the quarry at Rongorongo where unfinished Moai lie embedded in the earth. These figures, half-formed, offer more than clues to technique. They offer insight into process, into rhythm, into the breath of creation. To carve a Moai was to enter a state of prayer. The carver would begin at the head and work downward, the body emerging like a vision from the stone. No metal tools, no haste. Just obsidian, volcanic tough, and the knowledge held in the blood of ancestors. But beyond form, there is alignment. Many of the Moai face inland, not randomly, but to watch over their clans. Others align with celestial events, the rising sun at solstice, the path of certain stars. The stones speak in angles and shadows, in light and reflection. This is not coincidence. This is cosmology. The island itself was read like a star chart. The positions of the Moai, the Ahu, the petroglyphs, all of them, are encoded with a worldview that saw no separation between the heavens and the earth. The people did not look to the sky and see something distant. They saw family, they saw reflection, and the stones held this connection. Petroglyphs carved into boulders show not only birds and fish but lunar phases, solar paths, tidal rhythms. These were not decorations, they were guides, sacred reminders that to live well is to live in harmony with the turning of the world. This is the wisdom of the stones, that stillness is not absence, but attention, that silence is not forgetting, but remembering, that strength does not come from resistance, but from surrender to rhythm. and that endurance is not a static thing but a breathing one. The Moai have endured not because they resist time but because they flow with it. Rain softens their edges, wind smooths their gaze, and yet, they remain. They are not static monoliths, but participants in the long, slow breath of the island. So tonight, dreamer, as you drift deeper into rest, feel the weight of this wisdom not as a burden, but as grounding. Let the stone hold your thoughts. Let the silence speak gently in your mind. Let the memory of those ancient hands remind you that creation need not be hurried, that meaning takes shape in time, and that you, too, are carved from something eternal. In the next chapter we will explore the paradox of isolation, how the very remoteness of Rapa Nui became both sanctuary and sorrow, shaping the island's fate and its strange sense of timelessness. There are places in this world where the winds speak more slowly, where the shadows stretch a little longer, and where the hours, though passing, seem to rest rather than rush. Rapa Nui is one such place. It is often called the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, over 2,000 kilometers from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by nothing but the breathing silence of the Pacific. Yet its solitude is not a void, it is a spell, and those who arrive whether by canoe, by sail, or by dream quickly sense it. Here, time does not flow in the usual way. It pools, it waits, it remembers. This is the paradox of Rapa Nui. Its remoteness, once its greatest gift, also became its heaviest burden. The ocean that protected the island from enemies also kept it tethered to itself. With no other land in sight, there was nowhere to go when balance tipped, nor forest to borrow from, no neighbor to trade with, no wind to carry help. But before that turning, isolation was sacred. It was a sanctuary for ritual, for tradition, for refinement. The people did not measure themselves against foreign kings or distant cities. They measured themselves against their ancestors, against the stars, against the harmony of the island itself. It was not about expansion, it was about depth, depth of craft, depth of memory, depth of presence. And then, slowly, as the forest thinned and the Moai grew heavier, time began to shift. It became not a river, but a still pond reflecting only what had come before. The people looked backward for solutions. The Birdman cult arose, not to innovate, but to recall a deeper power. The glyphs of Rongorongo emerged not to begin a new story, but to preserve an old one. It was as if the island knew. It knew that change was coming from beyond the horizon. It knew that the rhythm would break, and so it paused. In this stillness, the people waited. They watched the sky. They carved the last Moai. They whispered old chants. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, as though bracing for a tide that could not be stopped. When the sails arrived, as we've seen, they brought disruption, disease, conversion, captivity. The pulse of time resumed, but it was no longer the island's own. It beat two foreign drums, and yet, the stillness never truly ended. Even now, travelers to Rapa Nui speak of feeling adrift in time, of standing among the Moai and losing all sense of hour or day, of walking ancient paths and sensing footsteps beside them that are not their own. Clocks tick, but they are not heard. Phones work, but the signal feels distant. Time here is circular, dreamer. It spirals like the glyphs, like the petroglyphs of waves carved into stone. The past never vanishes. It circles overhead, like seabirds tracing invisible patterns. It seeps into the soil, into the bones of statues, into the breath of those who chant in the old tongue. Even the sun, setting over the western cliffs, seems to linger, as if reluctant to leave. This is the stillness of Rapa Nui, not stagnation but presence, not paralysis but deep listening. To be here is to feel the weight of all that has come before, not crushing but grounding. It is to remember that you are not the first to seek meaning in silence, that others, long ago, also stood beneath stars and asked questions without answers. So tonight, dreamer, let go of the clock. Let the Moai keep time. Let the wind carry you not forward, but inward. For in this place where time stands still, something ancient stirs not in haste, not in fear, but in wisdom. And now, as we drift toward the final chapters of this journey, we begin to gather the threads, the teachings, the echoes, the contemplations, and lay them gently across your resting heart. In the next chapter, we will walk the path of the dreamers, the visionaries and elders who kept the flame alive, even in the island's darkest hours. Not all fires burn with fury. Some burn low, like embers in ash, glowing gently through generations. They do not roar, they do not consume, they endure. On Rapa Nui, in the quiet corners of crumbling homes and the dark hollows of sacred caves, the flame of memory was kept by such fire, not by kings or warriors, but by those who listened, those who whispered, those who remembered. These were the keepers of the flame. When the forests fell, when the Moai lay shattered, when ships arrived with chains and crosses, the sacred center of the island did not collapse, it retreated. Into the hands of elders. Into lullabies sung in secret. Into chants muttered as offerings were buried beneath coral stones. The world may have thought Rapa Nui was lost, but it was not. It was guarded by grandmothers with wrinkled hands who traced sacred symbols in the dirt, by children who learned to name the winds before they learned to write, by fishermen who recited genealogies while mending nets, by dancers who moved in rhythms that predated words. These keepers did not wear crowns. They wore silence, and within that silence, the island continued to speak. Let us remember them now. There was Paparanga, an elder who could sing all the way back to the first canoe. Her voice carried stories like waves, sometimes soft, sometimes crashing. She never learned to read, but she knew the language of stars. When asked about the Moai, she would press her palm to the earth and say, "They listen better than we do." There was Metua Tuki, who carved Moai in miniature not to sell, but to remember. He worked slowly, always in the mornings, when the sun rose just behind his shoulder. He spoke little, but every groove he made was a line of prayer. There was Anna Pui, who hid a fragment of Rongorongo in her roof for decades, not because she understood it but because she loved it, because she knew it once held voices that had faded, and because her mother had told her, if they burn the words, bury the echo. These were not myths, they were people. They endured the centuries of forgetting not by fighting but by tending. Like gardeners of spirit, they watered memory with care and time. Their actions were not loud. They did not protest with banners. They protested by teaching a child to pronounce an old name, by wrapping a child in barcloth woven the ancient way, by walking the old paths barefoot, so that the stones might feel remembered. Even today, their presence lingers. In every Rapa Nui school that teaches the native tongue, in every festival where the Birdman is reborn in painted skin, in every Moai gently lifted back onto its ahu, not by outsiders, but by those whose blood remembers. The keepers of the flame remind us that history is not something locked in books or museums. It is something breathed, something cradled, something sung across generations until it becomes the very air. You, too, dreamer, are a keeper now. In listening, you inherit the silence. In remembering, you honor the watchful eyes of stone. In dreaming, you keep the flame alive. For the truth of Rapa Nui is not merely that it was forgotten and found again, it is that it was never truly lost. Its guardians walked quietly, patiently, holding memory like fire cupped in the hand, waiting for the world to still long enough to see it glow. And now, in the soft hush of this moment, we prepare for closure, not as an ending, but as a return. The mysteries remain. The Moai still watch, but you, dreamer, have walked among them. You have heard the voices. In the next chapter, we step gently into reflection, into understanding, into the timeless echo that binds all who seek meaning in silence. There is a sound that does not fade. It is not loud. It does not strike. It does not break the air. Instead, it lingers. It hums, beneath breath, beneath thought, beneath the ticking of clocks. It follows rivers and wind. It rests beneath mountains and rides on the backs of seabirds. It curls around ancient statues and sleeps inside carved stones. It is the sound of memory, of reverence, of presence. It is the echo, and on Rapa Nui, this echo never ends. You cannot measure it with instruments. You cannot record it in numbers or diagrams. But when you walk the island with a quiet heart, you feel it, beneath your steps, behind your eyes, in the space between waves and silence. It is not merely the echo of voices past. It is the echo of what still matters. The Moai do not speak, and yet they do. The cliffs do not sing, and yet they do. The caves do not whisper, and yet they do. This echo carries not answers, but invitations. It asks you to slow, to wonder, to feel, to listen with your bones. Even now, as you drift through this quiet contemplation, the echo surrounds you. It follows not behind but within. It is the resonance of all that came before, gently nudging you to remember that you, too, are part of the story. Because the island does not end at its shores. Its spirit sails. It moves with those who carry its memory, not only the Rapa Nui people, but all who hold space for silence, all who honor what is unseen, all who understand that not all stories demand resolution. Some simply wish to be heard. The echo moves through the scholar trying to decipher Rongorongo, knowing he may never succeed. It moves through the child learning her people's tongue, one forgotten word at a time. It moves through the carver shaping wood with reverence for ancestors who shaped stone. And it moves through you, dreamer, because to dream of Rapa Nui is to enter the echo, to close your eyes and feel not the absence of time, but the fullness of it. to understand that time does not always move forward. Sometimes it circles, sometimes it deepens, sometimes it stands still not in defiance, but in devotion. This is what the island teaches, that there is wisdom in waiting, strength in stillness, truth in mystery. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to solve the puzzle. You only need to feel it. Let the echo guide your thoughts tonight. Let it settle into the quiet folds of your rest. Let it remind you that even in a world of noise, there are places where the sacred still sings softly, eternally, patiently. In the next and final chapter of our journey, we return to the Moai once more. But this time, we return not as wanderers, but as witnesses. They have stood through storms, through the erasure of forests, the shifting of stars, the coming and going of names spoken and forgotten. They have endured wind that bites and sun that burns. They have stood watch while fires faded, while silence returned, while memory slept, and still they remain. The Moai, carved by hand, placed with ceremony, toppled by change, and sometimes lifted again. They are more than monuments. They are witnesses. The Rapa Nui never built their Moai to rule. They built them to remember, to honor, to embody. These statues are not symbols of power, but of presence. They are the ancestors' eyes not looking to dominate, but to connect. And now, dreamer, as our journey draws near its end, we return to these watchers once more, not to question them, not to decipher them, but to sit with them. Imagine it now. You stand upon the windswept plain of Ahu Tongariki. The air is cool, threaded with salt. Grass bends in rhythm. Before you, 15 Moai stand aligned. Some tall, some slender, each unique, each carved from the same mountain, each carried by human hands and reverent breath. Behind them, the sea swells a mirror to the sky, and around you, the wind rises. But it does not roar. It speaks low, continuous, threading through the hollow eye sockets, over weathered shoulders, between the stones of the platform. This is the island's voice, not in language but in sensation. The wind is the final guardian, the last priest. It circles the statues, reminds them that time still moves, even here, and they respond not in speech, but in stillness. Their presence is a sermon, a meditation, a testament that something lasting can still be made in a world of breaking, that something sacred can endure in silence, that eyes carved from stone can still see into the soul of a world that has forgotten how to pause. You are not alone here. Others have stood in this spot. Elders, children, dreamers, they too have felt the gaze of the Moai not upon their body but upon their being. It is not a gaze that demands, it is one that remembers. Even in their brokenness, the Moai do not lose meaning. In fact, their cracks are part of the wisdom. Like the furrows on a grandmother's face, they are lines of experience, of having witnessed change and yet continued to stand or lie with grace. Some have asked why the Moai turn their backs to the sea, but perhaps it is not rejection. Perhaps they face the land because they know it needs remembering. Perhaps they trust the ocean to take care of itself. Perhaps they are looking at us, not judging, but waiting. Waiting for us to remember the importance of ancestors, the sacredness of silence, the dignity of endurance, the necessity of reverence. Tonight, let them watch over you. Let their gaze hold your worries. Let their stillness become your breath. Let their patience soften your sleep. And when you wake, may you carry their wisdom with you. Not loudly, but like a stone warmed by the sun, quiet, enduring, real. For now, we prepare to leave this island not in body, but in dream. But the Moai will remain, as they always have, as they always will, watching, waiting, whispering. In the closing moments of our journey, let us gather these ancient voices into stillness, and offer gratitude. And so, dear dreamer, our journey across the ancient stones and whispered winds of Rapa Nui comes to a gentle close. Let the voices of the ancestors settle now into stillness. Let the breath of the island soften your thoughts, like ocean mist upon volcanic stone. We have walked together through the sacred quarry where the Moai were born from mountain dreams. We have descended into caves carved with memories, and followed the echo of chants once sung beneath stars. We have stood in the shadow of statues older than kings, and listened to the wind that carries the language of a time that never ends. This island, once carved by fire and shaped by hand, has spoken not in answers but in presence, not with noise but with meaning. The Moai remain still, vigilant, enduring, and so too does the spirit of those who carved them, the dreamers, the navigators, the keepers of the flame. Their memory is not entombed in stone, it is alive in the hush between waves, in the chant behind closed eyes, in the sacred silence you now carry within you. If tonight's journey has brought you peace, consider becoming a regular traveler on these mystical paths. Subscribe, and join our circle of dreamers who gather beneath the stars to remember that history is not only what is written, it is what is felt. Let the gentle chime of future stories guide you back, each week, to the sacred spaces time forgot, and share with us, if you will, how the island spoke to you. From where in the world did you drift into tonight's story? What echoes linger in your spirit? May this community of dreamers continue to grow, connected not by borders, but by breath, by reverence, by the shared belief that even in the quietest corners of the earth something sacred still waits. Until we meet again, dreamer, may your rest be deep and kind. May your dreams be filled with wind-carved cliffs, with the gaze of ancient watchers, and the warmth of stories too vast for words. Sleep well, and let the island remember you.